our guest speaker, Kevin Snipes. So my name is Sana Mamami, and I'm the area coordinator or actually I was the area coordinator in pottery. Del Haro is the area coordinator in pottery. I'm a professor in the pottery department, and we are really excited to have Kevin with us today. I want to thank the CSU Pottery Guild and ASCSU for supporting this visit. So I don't usually read bios offline. I usually will tell an anecdote or tell a story, but I really enjoy this short bio that Kevin has on your website, so I was just going to read
I have
that.
no idea what it says.
Yeah, like that's sort of how it is. Although I did share an anecdote about how I first met Kevin at the workshop today. And I won't repeat that story. I will just say that after spending a few days with Kevin at a symposium in Lawrence, Kansas, I just really wanted to find a way to spend more time with Kevin. And so I was really excited when I found out that Kevin wasn't, I found out through a mutual colleague that I thought you were in Philadelphia doing a residency, and then I found out you were in Denver for a residency, and I thought this is a great opportunity to invite Kevin to CSU. So Kevin Snipes was born in Philadelphia but grew up mostly in Cleveland, Ohio. He received a BFA in ceramics and drawing from the Cleveland Institute of Art in 1994. After leaving graduate school at the University of Florida, Kevin has led a seemingly nomadic artistic life, constantly making, no matter where he is. Kevin has participated in several artist residency programs, including the Clay Studio in Philadelphia, Watershed Center for Ceramic Arts in Newcastle, Maine, and has received a Taunt Fellowship from the Archie Berry Foundation in Montana. Exhibiting both nationally and internationally, including a recent solo, well, maybe not so recent, I'm not sure when this was, at the Society of Arts and Crafts in Boston. Ancient. Kevin has exhibited in Jingdezhen, China, and in numerous places that I won't spend too much time on here. Kevin combines his love of constructing unconventional pottery with an obsessive need to draw on everything that he produces, creating a uniquely dynamic pottery of work. And here it says you recently reside in Pittsburgh, but now we know that...
That was, I left Pittsburgh and I moved to Georgia. No, wait, first I left Pittsburgh and I moved to California, Southern California.
So it's been
and then Georgia, and then Philadelphia, which is where and then I'm here now.
So continuing this lovely nomadic lifestyle. So please join me in welcoming Kevin Snipes.
Thanks. I'm gonna not stand up. I'm gonna sit down and relax and get this talk. Let me know if I'm not talking loud enough. So in the beginning, I talked to you this morning about the start to my artist career, and it really was here. I was a terrible student, but I realized that it's okay to be kind of a weird kid, and I feel like a lot of my life I felt like I had to hide that, and I had to be like a cool kid or whatever. But I was really an awkward kid. I had lots of sensitivities to foods and environmental stuff, and I stuttered a lot. I had a hard time. I also my eyes were really good for a while, but then my doctor told me that they were going to go bad. And when it started to become time for me to wear glasses, I didn't want to wear them, so I couldn't actually see the front of the board in front. So I would just draw Snoopy all the time. So Snoopy was really, Charlie Brown, the Peanuts, but especially Snoopy. So it's kind of the beginning of my career as an artist, not being able to see. It's kind of a conundrum. It's kind of like an oxymoron, right? It's like, I can't see, so I'll just draw. And so my teachers thought I was a really bad student, but I was pretty smart. I just wasn't doing the work because I couldn't see them. I was doing some of the work, not all of it. So when I was 15, I got a job in a public library because I loved children's books, even though by the time I was not reading them anymore. I still love the illustrations. And things like, I love the proportion that this girl is smaller than the bees. maybe kind of the same size, but she's got this huge knife. Just sort of this juxtaposition of things. So a lot of my inspiration comes from like comic books and cartoons. This is Linda Berry. And Linda Berry, Ernie Pook's comic was about sort of these hardships, emotional hardships of childhood. And then this is R. Crumb, who kind of talked about his own personal psychoses in his work. And then even thinking about things like, like textbooks is a narrative. Like they tell the story of being human. Like, so we have these things like mathematics and things, and they describe basically the human experience in different ways. So just thinking about storytelling, comics are storytelling. And so like even like, this is a photographer, his name is Peter Hugo, and did a series of people and their pets, their strange pets. So that's actually a cheetah, yes, right? And so this, I feel like there's like these people and this animal. They're just like, they tell stories. So then, of course, in ceramics, ceramics has been a form of storytelling forever. Like I think as long as people have been making pots, they've been putting marks on the pots that represent something about their society. So it's not anything new to put drawings on ceramics. And so this is from undergraduate school. And so probably was like 1993, which 30 years almost. Whoa, jeez. So this is earthenware and terra sigillata. And so just, this is called Shoes of Salvation. And I don't know what it means anymore, but it was part of a conversation of friends or girlfriend at the time. And I tend to do that a lot, where I'll have conversations with people, and then that conversation will become in my sketchbook, or like part of it, and then like some part of that conversation might then go on to the artwork. And I love working that way. It's almost like a novelist. Like if you're in the same room as me and we're having a conversation, I might hear something you say and it'll end up in my artwork. This is from a book of a Japanese photographer who just spent this like career just photographing these young people who would just kind of gather in this one area of Japan and dress in handmade clothes or like augmented clothing, and just like looking at things like social media for stories, and looking at things like graffiti art. I love that. As far as like this could be like a pot, a piece of pottery, and it is. I mean, it's a vessel, right? It's a building, so it contains people, rooms, and stuff like that. This is Cleveland, and I didn't grow up here. I grew up in the suburbs. But this is like downtown, the Flats area where the Lake Erie, we go into the Cuyahoga River, and there was all these steel mills and stuff, which are mostly closed, so mostly it's like urban decay. And there's something about urban decay that I really find interesting. Like, something about this history, but it's like decaying, so you can sort of see the past history, but the decay is what's on the surface. And so when I got out of undergraduate school, I switched to porcelain. And I was always a thrower. I made things that were in the round, but I was really interested in telling stories about communication. So the idea that in these two buildings that there's people inside them that are talking to each other, kind of. So I left undergraduate, finished undergraduate, I got my BFA in 1994. Then it was in 2000 when I went back to graduate school. So there was 6 years in there. And in that time, I was trying to figure out, like I talked about this morning, about the idea of conceptualness in ceramics, or pottery concepts. And so we were talking about what are concepts of pottery. And one of them is like containment. So this drawing is actually from my first year of graduate school. Thinking about containment as a theoretical thought, like not about like pottery, pottery contains things. That's like one of the main purposes of pottery is that containment. But I'm just trying to use it as a concept. So sorry, like I'm repeating myself from this morning for some of you. But this is sort of where it started. Is that thinking about how can I transform concepts that are not really thought of as concepts, they're just like the qualities of pottery. And so I made this little piece, and it's actually tiny. It's huge on the screen, but it'd be kind of interesting this big. Can you help me out, Del? But it actually fits in the palm of my hand, so it's really tiny. And so this was like an aha moment where it's like I built something that had something to do with the idea of two things that are different coming together. And I was really interested in this idea because of being African American and mostly not I like going to art school. I think there was a really small art school. The Cleveland Institute of Art was it was 5 years when I went to school, and the program, I think there was like 4 black people in the school, and I was the only black person in ceramics. So my entire art career has mostly been not being around black people, and yet, I think it's interesting, this dynamic. So you're sitting in the audience, and you're seeing me here talking, and we have somebody who's like half black. So there's a little bit of representation, but basically, I'm having mostly a white experience, whereas you guys are having more of a black experience because you're looking at me giving a talk. So there's sort of this funny thing that happens where, in this space, like I'm just not, experienced. I'm not a good representative of blackness. It's just not my life. And so, but having the burden of blackness has always been my life. And so trying to think about ways of, like, it's such a big thing in my life, like just going into a space and people automatically is making assumptions about me because of my skin color, has always been part of my life. That's just the way it's been. So I was trying to figure out how to make work about the idea of difference and otherness. And this piece, just without even a drawing on it, of the male and female in contrast to each other, it's two-sided in the fact that one side has holes in it and it can't contain anything. The other side is an area of containment. So I'm putting these two sections that are almost like opposites together. I'm also flipping the drawing to make the drawing from side to side have that same concept. So it's like, this is really exciting to me. So I kind of, basically this is like what I've been excited about, including in my artwork since then, like in the past 20 years. So in graduate school, it's more like academic, and I did a lot of research in critical theory and psychology. This piece is called Swiss cheese piece for obvious reasons. But the divider on the bottom, just to sort of like make it even more evident of this division of the two sides, was important. And then I made this piece, which actually I don't have the other side because this is actually the last piece that I photographed on film, and I lost the slide. I probably have it someplace, but I haven't found it yet. So the other side, there's another. I do this thing with male and female because it's like an obvious duality, but it's really, I mean, more and more it's becoming less obvious duality with transgenderness and all that. But so this is from graduate school from 2002. It's a teapot, and it's called the Secret Passage Teapot. And in actuality, there's a secret passageway that goes through the whole part and up the side and up the spout, so you can actually pour tea out of it if you want to. And it works pretty good, but that's not the point. The point is that the secretness of it, that it's actually this hidden thing, and also that the conversation between the two people are secret. It's like a secret conversation. So thinking about that content as like material for me to work with was the important thing. So then I started thinking about like being able to make sculptural movements in my work happen through this idea of things like like it felt like an awkward attachment because I was the only black person. So like, how can I make that awkward attachment a physical thing? bada bing. And just the idea that, like the holes became sort of a symbol of this idea of like this, they're like microphones or like they're like gears, like osmosis, where things transfer through from one side to the other. So it's not about, the strainer. Someone asked me like, what do you put in there? It's like, nothing. Ideas, concepts. So it's about, this idea of traveling from one side to the other. It's like when you're on the opposite side of something, you're still part of it. It's like you're contained in this one world of opposition. So I also draw a lot of bicycles. They show up a lot. And I talked about this morning about like, sorry, I lost my train of thought. I'm going to move on. This is Basquiat, and I feel like something I love about Basquiat died at age 27. But it's really interesting. He died in the 90s, I guess. But his work is like coming back. Like there's like a new, like on social media, I see all these painters who are painting like Basquiat paintings nowadays. But to me, what I love about his work is that it's sort of this coded message. Like there's all this information, and I have no idea what he's trying to communicate. But what I realized about this is that it's enough information for the viewer, for me, to be engaged in the artwork. And I love looking at it. But it's like, so there's a point where like, if you give someone too much information, it's like, it becomes an illustration, and it's like a one-liner, like, oh, I get it, move on. But if it's too little information, they'll look at it and they'll be totally confused, and they'll move on. And so that sweet point of finding like mystery to like obscureness and information, just like finding that sweet point in between is like something I'm really interested in. And it changes from piece to piece. I don't think there's any one way to find it, but it's just like it's something that people have said my work looks like Basquiat. Like physically it doesn't, but I think this whole juxtaposition of information and conveyance and mystery, that thing for me is really what is important. This is a photographer. Her name is Loretta Lux. And this piece, she makes up her photographs. These are photographs, but they're made up of lots and lots and lots of different photographs. And then she photoshops them together. So what you're seeing in this image, for instance, is almost two different views of the girl's face that are slightly different and put together. And I think there's something about that folded face that's really interesting to me. And so I really like this idea of this sort of, a lot of my inspiration also comes from cereal boxes. So how many of you have eaten cereal as a kid? And so you have the cereal box in front of you, and you're like eating your cereal, you're like totally engaged in that cereal box. You're like reading the ingredients, you're looking at the back, and it's like, if I can make artwork that adults are that engaged with my work, I feel like I've scored. Like, yes. So I feel like I'm trying to do that. Not make cereal boxes, but make that engagement with my work kind of built into it to draw people into that intensity. And I think, looking at these, I feel like they're like these little cereal boxes that you can get that are like these little things like this big. But also that idea of folding around the side, something about that I really like a lot. I give myself these experiments, so like thought experiments, like how much color is too much color. So this piece, I tend to use lots of different colors, underglazes, and they're little jars, and each underglaze has a different brush, and I have like 400 brushes, and so I could have like all these. I could have like 20 colors, And I get a small brush and a big brush in each color, so I have 40 different brushes with underglaze on it. And I have to go wash them off in the sink. And instead of like, oh, I'll just take it and I'll just wipe it off on my piece. And yeah, so that's a good way to clean the brushes. But also, like, I found out that this is like almost too much color for me. So another thought experiment is one of my favorite tools, art making tools as a kid, was that big ballpoint pen that has 4 colors with a little clicker. And so this piece has all 4 colors on it. You know, it's a kind of a brain exercise. It's like, how do you expand how you think about your work? And also, how do I connect to my childhood? How do I connect to my history? Another thought experiment is, instead of putting feet on things, what if the feet are actually part of the piece? And, you know, what does that do to the drawing? How does it affect the drawing? Another thought experiment is like working with tagboard, which we talked about this morning. This is file folder paper, and sometimes I'll actually make pots out of paper first. And they don't often, sometimes they become templates for real work, but often I just make them just to see them in 3 dimensions, because I do work with slabs. And it's kind of an exercise just to sort of see volume and proportions and things like that. Another thought experiment was, I've never been a smoker, but I wanted to make an ashtray that was like so good that even non-smokers would want to own it. So this is the standing upright. And it was not a very long lived. I think I made 2 of these and then went on. But then this piece was like, this is an ashtray flower vase. So it's like life and death all rolled into one. So this idea of blackness is really interesting, because I feel like, you know, there's more and more now, but when I was in grad school, there weren't that many, and maybe that's a superpower. Maybe I can use that somehow. Even though I don't really feel like I have like a lot of, like, I've never, you know, I grew up in the suburbs, that was really diverse. I went to art school, which is not a very black thing. I don't have a lot of black friends, because most of my friends are artists. And I work a lot, so I'm in the studio a lot, so people in the studio are my friends. But I've been looking at, you know, different areas of blackness as sort of a resource, you know, because I am black, and you can't do black because you're not black. So, anyway, I'm just pointing at you because, sorry, no reason. So I've been thinking about that, you know, okay, well, I am black, so how can I use that? You know, why not? You know, and so I've been looking at these images of kind of black hair and trying to think of them, you know, and this is, at this point, it's sort of outdated. This lecture I'm giving is like sort of development. So this is even like, maybe at this point, like 7 years ago. But just thinking about, you know, what does blackness mean? This is an artist's rendition of black hair. You know, no one's really black. You know, this is black, but you don't see people that color. And the idea, the construct of black and white, as, you know, like Dell's not white. He's not the color of paper next to him.
Pretty white.
You're not even close to white. You're so far from white. So if I were a picture and I'd said that's white, I'd be,
Okay.
yeah.